Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining from in the world, and welcome to this webinar on climate finance and bridging the gap to leverage public and private funding for subnational island jurisdictions. We are very happy to be continuing this series of events as part of this initiative hosted by the SNIJ Climate Coalition, which I'll be telling you some more about shortly, and especially with our partners from the Special Envoy from Bonaire, Saba, and Sint Eustatius, and the government of Curacao that have, together with Island Innovation, initiated this series of events and programming specifically to focus on the challenges that islands that may or may not fall into the SIDS category have, whether they're overseas territories, regions, or associated states, when it comes to accessing climate finance. As some of you may know, this started on the sidelines of earlier this year, on the sidelines of the Global Sustainable Island Summit, with the first forum for subnational island jurisdictions on climate finance on the beautiful island of Nevis, and has been ongoing from various events that have been hosted at the UNFCCC COPs, looking again to advocate for the needs of a broad variety of islands when it comes to financing their adaptation and the specific gaps that are often faced there. I'm delighted today that we have a series of 5 speakers, and we specifically wanted to do a session with more of a Pacific focus. As recent sessions, we've had a good presence from the Caribbean, Europe, and Indian Ocean. And so that's why I'm awake at 1 a.m. in the morning here in Europe, which is absolutely fine because we have a great series of speakers who will be joining us from Niue, from Fiji, from the Pacific Island Development Bank, from French Polynesia, and then also one speaker who is joining us from Curacao in the Caribbean, or at least he's in Curacao. So I will introduce each of our speakers shortly, but in order to kick off the session, it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Minister Crosley Tatui, who is the Minister for Finance and Infrastructure from the government of Niue. Minister, I think you are there with us. I'm very happy that Niue is well represented here. I had the pleasure several years ago of visiting Niue, and so I'm familiar with the island, and we look forward to hearing some more about the work happening on climate adaptation and climate finance. So, Minister, over to you to open the session.
Thank you so much, James. Good morning from Singapore. Fellow speakers, I extend my warm greetings to you. It is my pleasure to be invited to this special webinar session this morning on the topic Island Innovation High-Level Webinar, Bridging the Climate Finance Gap, Leveraging Public and Private Funding. As a small island developing state, Niue continues to face challenges in terms of accessing funding opportunities, and there are a lot of constraints locally that we face. So Niue, like many Pacific Island nations, stands on the front line of the global climate crisis. Every year, we expect natural disasters in one form or another, whether it's a cyclone or a drought, heavy rain, etc. So rising sea levels, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, and extreme weather events are no longer projections of the future. They are the lived realities of our communities today. So we do not have the luxury of time, and our adaptation needs are urgent. And our path to resilience demands a united global response. It is in this spirit that we call for deeper global collaboration to tackle our shared climate challenges. Because climate change is not confined by borders, and neither should our solutions be. The small island states may be small in size, but we bring immense value to the global climate dialogue in lived experience, in traditional knowledge, and in the courage to act decisively together. One of the most pressing barriers to meaningful climate action remains the limited and complex access to climate finance. Despite the numerous funding mechanisms available, small island developing states continue to face systemic challenges, from cumbersome application processes and high co-financing requirements to a lack of technical capacity and fragmented donor coordination. So to truly mobilize climate finances, especially for adaptation, we must simplify access and build enabling systems that support countries like Niue. And this includes tailoring climate finance modalities to the specific needs and capacities of small island nations, strengthening readiness support and institutional capacity to develop bankable projects, reducing barriers to direct access and ensuring that funds reach communities on the ground, not just intermediaries, and bridging public and private investment by de-risking climate projects and unlocking blended finance mechanisms. To this extent, NUE also calls for the streamlining of global climate financing frameworks, including the Green Climate Fund, GCF, and other international climate funds, so that countries do not have to spend more time navigating bureaucracy than delivering results. We must also create opportunities to leverage private sector capital through stronger partnerships, transparent governance, and innovative financing models. Public finance must be used strategically to crowd in private investment, not as a replacement, but as a catalyst. For Niue, the stakes are existential. Climate finance is not just about funding projects, it is about securing our future, safeguarding our culture, and protecting our people and humanity. Let us work together with urgency and ambition to ensure that no nation is left behind in the race for climate resilience. Let our global commitments translate into action, and let access to climate finance be a bridge, not a barrier. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for delivering that insight and for joining us from Singapore. And we really appreciate you taking the time on your busy schedule. And especially, I think this conversation, having Niue represented, is a critical part of this conversation as both a SIDS, but one that is also in free association with New Zealand. And for many of the other islands represented here that have similar constitutional relationships with another state, I think the way that Niue and the Cook Islands have navigated that relationship is something that many other islands will want to learn from and understand more. So Niue has been a real leader in this space, and we thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, James.
It is now my pleasure to invite our next speaker, Joining us from Fiji, we have Kunal Singh, who is the Regional Climate Finance Access Network or CFAN advisor at the Pacific Community. And Kunal, I know you're in Fiji, but you have a regional focus in your work. So please do tell us more about the work that you do in climate finance and how that can apply to territories and subnational entities in the region. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. Bulavinaka, everyone. Pleased to join this very interesting webinar from Suva in Fiji, and very pleased to speak after the very interesting intervention by the Honorable Minister from NUE. Thank you for your time to be here, sir. I think just to give you a quick background of the work we do at the Climate Finance Access Network, in short, CFAN. So we are spread out. I mean, it's a network of climate finance access advisors spread out across 11 Pacific Island countries in the Pacific. And then, of course, my role becomes more cross-cutting because I'm based in SPC, the Pacific Community, which is headquartered in New Caledonia, but of course I'm based here in Fiji, of course because of strategic reasons. And most of the work that we do in the countries are member driven. So these mostly are tailor-made and aligned to the request that we receive from countries. For example, if we are basing a climate finance access network advisor, a CFN advisor in Fiji, in the Ministry of Climate Change, for that example, is because the country had asked for that particular expertise. It might be different for any other country, let's say Vanuatu, if they want expert to be based in the Ministry of Energy. This needs to be a person who comes up with that particular capability and capacity to provide that kind of expertise to that particular ministry. So it's a purely member-driven process that we follow. That the request that we receive, of course, from countries. Now, of course, my role in particular at the Pacific community is sort of to just look at how we can sort of bring in all the expertise together on a regional level. It might be on the access components, or it might be mostly on the coordination and facilitation aspect, or it sometimes leads to the capacity building aspect. It's one large component of what CFN does. So I'll probably touch on the four key areas that we work on as CFN advisors, and the work that our CFN advisors do in the 11 Pacific Island countries that we have embedded advisors in, and the role that I play as a regional advisor. And of course, like I said, we are also trying to cover the rest of the countries that are still remaining in the CFN network, the three Pacific Island countries. And I'm very pleased to say that we have one of our CFN advisors based in French Polynesia, Manon, and she'll be, of course, speaking later on in this session. Now, just going back to the intervention and what we do and the nature of the work we do. So I think the key focus for our work is climate finance access. Climate finance, like the minister in his intervention said very rightly, is the key climate finance enabler. So the enabler of climate action. So I think if we need to mobilize our NDCs, if we need to meet our priorities in our NAPs, I think the key cross-cutting issue is climate finance. And this is one of our largest priorities, one of our top priorities for the Pacific to ensure that climate finance flows at the speed and rate at which we want it to, given that we have already declared that we are in a climate emergency in the Pacific. So we need the climate finance to actually tap into the areas of climate finance of regional priorities, which are the adaptation and mitigation needs. We provide a lot of support on training and mentorship. So this might look at providing actually organizing trainings, so dedicated trainings and workshops to train and build capacity in Pacific Island countries, mostly with dedicated ministries, whether it's implementing ministries or executing ministries. In addition to that, we also provide support for institutional strengthening. This mostly is relevant to our subnational island jurisdictions, because these are the countries and territories that don't usually get access to multilateral funds. So I think our advisors, what they do, they work very closely with these government ministries to ensure that their systems are properly aligned and the systems are functioning to ensure that whatever sources of climate finance they can get, whether it's from a philanthropic finance or from a innovative climate finance angle, is actually flowing into the right the right direction, addressing the vulnerable needs of the communities in these particular territories. We also promote knowledge sharing and peer learning. So for countries that have had successes accessing finance from variety of sources, this might be innovative climate finance sources. uh, we encourage that the territories share their knowledge, best practices, and then we try to promote that kind of learning exchange between these countries and territories. And then, of course, finally, the concept of regionalization, right? How can we all come as a collective of the region to ensure that we work together, such as the platforms that we are now promoting is the PRF. So how can we ensure that territories are benefiting from that, as well as the countries, of course, the 14 Pacific Island countries? So the concept of regionalization is something that we try to encourage and promote as much as we can to ensure that we are equipping our countries as much as we can to receive support from them. I'll stop there and then happy to take any questions following this. Over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kunal, for that overview from the regional perspective, as you mentioned. And obviously, there's a number of territories or subnational island jurisdictions that fall within the region, and we'll be going on to hear from Manon in French Polynesia shortly. I just also wanted to mention that in the chat, we have a number of relevant islands that are represented. If you haven't already introduced yourself to our audience, please do go ahead in the chat and say where you're joining from. But many different SIDS countries represented, but also some national island jurisdictions, including Tobago, Zanzibar, Niue, the Northern Mariana Islands, Bermuda. Where else do we have? More from Bermuda, Nevis, and Curacao. And I can see Vanessa Torre is joining here from Curacao, so I'll give a special shout out to Vanessa for all the work that she has been doing on subnational island jurisdictions and the status of the Dutch Caribbean, especially to raise awareness and build new finance mechanisms to attract financing for climate in the region. That's been a really important part of setting this up. I'll now go to our next speaker. So, speaking of the Caribbean and actually Curacao, where Xavier is currently, Xavier Blackman is the Chief Operating Officer of the Continental Gateway Group and was in attendance during the Global Sustainable Island Summit not long ago. And we thought it was very important also when we think about climate finance, not only to think about government, multilateral funding, but also the opportunities from the private sector as well. And you've done much work, especially in the Dutch Caribbean, on different financing opportunities. So over to you, Xavier.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, everybody, or good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. Also, welcome to the Honorable Minister. And I think, James, I want to echo what you said about, islands looking at each other's models and using those examples to advance their own models, and specifically the islands in the Pacific have worked out some very interesting models, not just constitutionally, but also finance-wise. So I just wanted to reflect a little bit on let's say, a few impediments that keep private investments from flowing into subnational islands jurisdictions. And I want to start off with, let's say, what are the generally recognized barriers to pipeline development and obviously ultimately project development. So we have different reports. You have the WIPO UNIDO report, the GSCG report, and most of those reports, including the annual reports of most multilateral development banks, have recognized a number of issues that are impeding development. One is lack of bankable projects and the mismatch in investments. Then you have limited access to early stage project development and technical assistance for projects. The third one is fragmented coordination between public and private sector actors. And then you have limited transparency and access to pipeline data. So those are kind of generally recognized issues in the literature that you can find. And generally speaking, there are three instruments and solutions that are offered to address those issues. The first one is strengthening project preparation facilities and technical assistance. The second one is enhancing coordination between public and private finance. And the third one is one that is, I would say, often overlooked, but very important, which is leveraging digital platforms for project pipeline transparency. Now, like I said, these are generally recognized issues in the multilateral development finance space globally. And for the SNIJs, I think there are some specific issues that need to be addressed that kind of overlap with what I just mentioned. And what I want to first point out is that there needs to be a proper supportive regulatory framework. Before you can even think about blended finance, whichever finance you are looking at, private finance, you need to have a properly regulated framework. And I'm not just talking about just tax holidays, but in general, fiscal incentives that truly benefit the local economy and the local communities. If private, foreign, or local investors benefit, that's fine. But the objective should be first and foremost to support and build the local economies and the communities. So that's the first one. The second one is also very obvious, I think, is limiting red tape and work towards ideally a one-window process for investors. And the third one is also very important and kind of is linked to the constitutional arrangements between island jurisdictions and the metropolitan states, is that the two should not be competing. So in creating these frameworks, we should be very cautious that the metropolitan state does not implement regulations or a framework that puts the island jurisdiction at a disadvantage towards the metropolitan state. So I think those are important ground rules. Then some specific measures that need to be taken into account. Actors, including IPAs, should be more proactive when sourcing funding, so be more out there seeking funding for projects. Technical assistance and capacity building should be provided and funded by both sectors, so the private and public sector, to provide that to project owners. Blended and thus de-risked capital, and most importantly, patient capital should be promoted, because development should be based on partnerships, not just between governments and private sector in general, but more importantly, between the capital providers and the capital seekers, the project owners, if you want to really have proper development. And then what I mentioned before, database for matching investments, very important to make sure that the work of the IPAs is supported. And then the last, but maybe not, maybe most important part is that we need to move from a system of or a situation of competition to collaboration between private and public sectors, between actors in the private sectors specifically, because if the pie increases overall, there's enough for everybody to get a larger piece of that pie. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that overview. I think some critical points there. We've also been looking at how these lessons from the Caribbean and from the Pacific can be shared between different regions. So I'm glad that we are able to have this example coming in from the Caribbean as well, to see how some of those lessons might be applied there. Next, I'd like to introduce, we have a video submission from Lindsay Timarong, who is the President and CEO of the Pacific Islands Development Bank, based in Guam. And very interesting and relevant to this topic, that the bank covers not only independent small island developing states, including the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Micronesia, but also Guam itself and the Northern Mariana Islands, both of which fit into this subnational island jurisdiction category. So if we can go ahead and play Lindsay's video.
Warm greetings to all participants. My name is Lindsay Timarong. I am the President and CEO of the Pacific Islands Development Bank, and I'm honored to contribute to this critical dialogue hosted by Island Innovation. On behalf of Pacific Islands Development Bank, I want to thank the organizers for bringing us together at this crucial moment in our collective climate journey. Island communities are often portrayed as the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to climate change. But we are far more than that. We are innovation hubs, cultural strongholds, and guardians of vast ocean territories. And now more than ever, we are leaders on the front lines of climate action. Despite the billions pledged toward global climate goals, only a fraction ever reaches the ground, particularly in small island and subnational jurisdictions. According to the latest Global Landscape of Climate Finance report, it is estimated that annual climate finance reached $1.9 trillion in 2023, with annual growth averaging 26% between 2021 and 2023. Yet, less than 2% of all accessible finance is flowing directly to island governments or local authorities. Why? The reasons are systemic. Financing mechanisms remain complex, fragmented, and bureaucratically demanding. Requirements for co-financing, fiduciary standards, and results frameworks are often designed with national governments or large institutions in mind, not the realities of a state or island jurisdiction with a population of 50,000 people or less. Here in the North Pacific, where I serve in my role, we see this clearly. The needs are immediate. Rising seas, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, increasingly severe typhoons, and droughts. But the tools to respond are locked behind multiple layers of international processes, technical applications, and limited institutional bandwidth. That is why the launch of the Subnational Island Jurisdiction Climate Coalition is so important. The SNIJ Climate Coalition is not merely a symbolic alliance. It is a transformative platform to aggregate demand, pool expertise, and strengthen our collective ability to engage with donors, development banks, and private financiers. It is a structure that recognizes our shared challenges, but also our shared strengths. Subnational island jurisdictions often have more agility, innovation, and social cohesion than their national counterparts. We can pilot new technologies, implement projects faster, and build locally rooted resilience strategies if we have access to the capital. As I understand it, the SNIJ Coalition will be working to advance the principle of climate finance subsidiarity, meaning resources should flow directly to those who are closest to the problem and most equipped to solve it. Let me share a few examples from our region. In the Federated States of Micronesia, the National Development Bank, the only accredited institution under the Green Climate Fund as a direct access entity, aims to successfully mobilize Green Climate Fund resources to pilot climate-resilient housing projects across the region, and particularly in low-lying coastal communities. The homes will be designed and built to withstand the ever more severe typhoons, and some will be elevated above flood zones, designed by islanders for islanders. In Palau, public-private partnerships have been envisioned to enable community-based solar microgrids to reduce diesel dependency and strengthen energy resilience, especially in outer islands where the central grid is not feasible. In other parts of the world, similar initiatives have been proposed or piloted, such as in the Caribbean, where there has been success in rolling out resilience bonds and catastrophe insurance pools that protect fiscal stability after extreme weather events. These mechanisms are adaptable and with technical support can be scaled to other SNIJ contexts. Sadly, successes are the exception and not the rule. For every project that makes it through the pipeline, many more stall due to lack of financing, capacity, or political leverage. We cannot allow innovation to be buried by bureaucracy. So how do we close the gap? One answer lies in blended finance, strategically combining public, concessional, and private funding to de-risk investments and make climate solutions more attractive. For instance, regional development banks, like ours, can be used as a vehicle to offer first loss guarantees or concessional lending terms to catalyze private investment in resilient infrastructure, clean energy, or sustainable private sector projects. But for private capital to flow, we must also create enabling environments, robust project pipelines, predictable regulation, bankable models, and local expertise. That's where partnerships with global institutions, technical service providers, and philanthropic investors become essential. We must also challenge traditional risk perceptions. Investing in SNIJs is not high risk. It is high impact. The returns may not always be measured in dollars, but in avoided losses, improved livelihoods, cultural preservation, and ecological stability. That's why we are also strengthening regional mechanisms such as DB Prime, the Development Bank's Pact for Regionally Integrated Micronesian Economies. This alliance links development banks across the freely associated states to collaborate on policy alignment, joint financing, and investment readiness. For those who may not be too familiar with this part of the region, the freely associated states are the 3 North Pacific nations that have compact agreements or treaties with the United States and provide the U.S. with strategic military access to our lands and seas, namely the Republic of Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Through DB Prime, we aim to coordinate housing finance data, promote climate resilient infrastructure lending, and present a united front in accessing larger climate funds. Collective effort increases our bargaining power and reduces duplication of effort across institutions that are already stretched thin. So what do we need from our global partners? We need simplified access, streamline applications, and offer direct access pathways for subnational governments and their financial institutions. We need to build capacity, not just through one-off training, but through long-term partnerships and embedded advisory support. We need investment in readiness. Help us develop pipelines of bankable projects, backed by feasibility studies and proper safeguards. And finally, we need to respect sovereignty, support our priorities and cultural frameworks, not impose them. But we also need to listen. Listen to the voices of those who live with climate impacts daily, who know the land and sea, not as abstract ecosystems, but as home. In closing, I commend Island Innovation and the architects of the SNIJ Climate Coalition for giving voice to a long overlooked group of climate champions. We may be small in population or territory, but we are vast in knowledge, resilience, and ambition. And let's not forget heart. Let this conversation be more than an exchange of ideas. Let it be a commitment to action. Let's bridge the finance gap, not with more promises, not with more lip service, but with partnerships rooted in trust, equity, and shared responsibility. Thank you again. I look forward to learning the outcomes from your discussions today and to forging collaborative partnerships to see a momentum develop in creating innovative solutions together.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for that excellent overview of the role that regional development banks can play when it comes to deploying climate finance. And I think those examples from the Northern Pacific of the specific challenges faced by subnational island jurisdictions there when it comes to accessing climate finance are critical. I really appreciate also making the direct connection of what climate finance means to people's day-to-day lives. I think sometimes we have these conversations in the abstract without necessarily thinking on the day-to-day how this critical conversation shapes individuals' lives. So we now come to our final intervention. We're very happy to have French Polynesia represented in this conversation. And Manon Makede is here from the Climate Finance Access Network and also from the government of French Polynesia. So Manon, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Marua, and thank you, Lindsay Timarong, for her speech. That was very clear, informative, and especially even if she talks about impacts in the North Pacific, we can really relate in the South Pacific. So big thanks to her and also to other speakers. So
Manon,
French
can I
Polynesia.
just ask you to move the mic down slightly?
Yes, can you hear me better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. So French Polynesia, like others in this room, faces a unique set of barriers and opportunities when it comes to accessing climate finance. Just to name a few key barriers that are preventing French Polynesia from accessing climate finance compared to sovereign states. I'd like to point out that French Polynesia is locked out of climate finance from major global funds like JCF and the Adaptation Fund because it is not a sovereign state. It is one of the overseas territories of France, which is a developed country. So OCTs like French Polynesia fall into a gray zone, vulnerable like developing countries, but classified as part of a developed country and thus not eligible to official development assistance, ODA, and more. Another key barrier is the smaller institutional capacity that has been described by Lindsay as well. So at this level, smaller administrative capacity and technical expertise can constrain the ability to design bankable projects to meet fiduciary standards. So we could talk about red tape and also to report at the level requested by some donors. Just to name another key barrier, but I will stop there, not to make the list too heavy. Donors may be uncertain on how to engage directly with French Polynesia. So it leads to sporadic and or coordinated support from donors, especially when they don't have an in-country representative. So despite these barriers, some things have worked so far in French Polynesia, and I'm going to name a few examples. So although French Polynesia can't access ODA-eligible multilateral funds like JCF or Adaptation Fund, it has benefited from French bilateral climate finance, so non-ODA, thanks to very strong partners like the French Development Agency and ADEME. We have benefited from EU funds, non-ODA as well, because the EU does support projects in overseas territories and territories, including French Polynesia. There are also regional or non-state projects that have happened with multilateral agencies. So I won't make the list too long, but projects with SPC or SPREP, funded by donors like Australia, New Zealand, or the EU, may sometimes indirectly include French Polynesia in technical assistance or training, and this is a very good tendency that we've been seen happening for the past years. So now to talk about more innovative approaches happening these days, I'd like to point out again that we are addressing the smaller capacity challenge by hiring more climate officers in country. So I can be an example of that. I am a CFAN advisor, and Kunal has explained that this is a network of climate finance advisors. It started in the Caribbean and now it's in the Pacific. And it could have not included French OCTs, but it does. And so French Polynesia, thanks to a private donor, through RMI and SPC, has a new outlook on climate finance. So it's been a year since I've been in that position. And since I've been in that position, I've insisted a lot on hiring more climate officers in the administration. So now I have more than just one colleague. There is not only a mitigation officer that used to be supported by the French Development Agency, but is now self-supported by the French Polynesia public budget. We also have a special envoy for climate. And now we're looking at hiring an adaptation officer who will be supported by an adaptation technical assistance. So this is possible thanks to ADEME and AFD once again. But as you can see, when SPC and RMI and a private donor entered that conversation, the team has really grown. So to insist more on the link between and the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector, we are working on making our climate plan and our NDC more bankable. And for the climate plan, this has involved a lot of the local private sector who does its part in terms of both mitigation, adaptation. And so since then we've been collaborating more and more. Just to give you one example that we're dealing with today, we are working on making green vehicles more accessible to the population. And so for that, we've talked with not only the car dealerships that import these vehicles, but also with the local banks who are working on new loans criteria favoring such vehicles. And in the government, we are working on the local tax system to make all of this coherent. And maybe I'm running out of time, so I'm going to give you just maybe one more example of something new for French Polynesia, and including blended finance. So at UNOC, if some of you have attended UNOC, so the UN Ocean Conference in Nice last June. So about a month ago, French Polynesia has made a very big announcement about establishing one of the world's largest networks of fully and highly protected marine areas. and there is a link with climate mitigation because of the carbon sinks and so on. And so for that, we've attracted the support of philanthropy and also the some public finance. So we are working on blended finance for such ambitious projects as well. I'm going to stop here and thank you all for being here with us today. Feel free to ask any questions on what have been left maybe a bit mysterious because I was going so quick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manon. Many interesting points there, and I'm very excited to see the different innovations that are being made in French Polynesia when it comes to climate finance and different approaches. I did want to ask you, you mentioned a private donor, and I do think that often that seems to be the case. So I'll ask all of our speakers actually to come on for the discussion now. I know that Xavier had to leave early, unfortunately, but Manon, Kunal, and possibly we still have the minister, I'm not sure, to join for the discussion. So Manon, just to highlight that point that you made, French Polynesia's participation was contingent on a private donor, was my understanding. And that often does seem to be the case, that special exceptions have to be made. So was that philanthropic? Are you able to highlight on that? Because there have been a lot of discussions of how philanthropy, for example, or foundations can complement work for government programs to allow for the access of subnational island jurisdictions.
So I wouldn't be able to comment too much because the donor, this one is anonymous, but it's also thanks to regional organizations like SPC who historically made the effort of including the French OCTs in the Pacific conversation. I'd like also to name the Pacific Island Forum, PIF, who's worked extensively with French Polynesia on including them in the conversation for the new Pacific Resilience Facility. This is very new for us to be included in such arrangements. So it's a pooled mechanisms. So yes, the key factor for me is, of course, philanthropy and private donors, but also the knowledge of regional organizations who do know our struggles, who do know how hard it is for us sometimes not to be included in some parts of climate finance. So I do think that the local knowledge of regional organizations is critical as well.
Absolutely. And Kunal, as a representative from a regional organization, could you comment further on, I guess, what those challenges can be and how SPC has made efforts to overcome those for including the different territories that may not always fall within the same frameworks as the SIDS countries?
Sure. Thank you, James. Happy to talk about that. And I think Manon has very well covered this extensively as well in her deliberation. But yeah, I think one of the reasons why we were particularly interested to work with territories is, of course, SPC is a French-owned organization, of course, serving the member countries of the Pacific. But we do have an interest and a dire, and we do see the dire need in these territories. And I think, like Manon and the previous speaker highlighted, we cannot shy away from the fact that these territories face the same amount of climate impacts and vulnerabilities as any other Pacific Island countries. It's just because of how they are. They're based on their sovereign ownership and rights. They are, of course, been this. They're not being able to access the multilateral climate funds, and of course, they don't have that kind of a luxury of the climate envelope that other Pacific Island countries or the greater SIDS and African states have. So one of the things we have done as SPC is, and of course Manon has talked about it as well, is how to extend, as one example is a CFN, how to extend the CFN network to French Polynesia and the other territories that we are now trying to do. Of course, if CFN was not part of SPC, this would not have been possible. The only reason we have been able to make this possible is because CFN extended that that support to SPC through, of course, philanthropic financing, and then we are able to extend that resource to French Polynesia. The other way we are trying to do this, of course, not as SPC, but of course as one crop, which is SPC, PIFs, and SPREP, is to extend the services of the PRF into saving the territories. So the PRF is, as I think Menon has spoken about it, is a Pacific owned and operated a grant mechanism that we are trying to advocate for right now. It's currently in its finance crowdsourcing phase, but I think very soon we'll start moving into the mobilization phase. I think there's a strong push there to support the needs of all its foreign member countries, and the territories are a part of the PIPS member states. So I think there's a resource there that's possible. The other way we are trying to do that, James, is of course trying to see how we can tap into the blending finance vehicle. This is something that has not been done in the region, or there's been a limited success of mobilizing blended finance, but we're trying to use our territories as examples, because these territories have access, or maybe some access, to catalytic grant financing from their parent states. And this could be very well used to create that kind of enabling environment to attract private sector financing. This might be, I wouldn't say it's a band-aid solution, but it's something that we can say will be the building blocks to then look into how we can get these countries to access concessional financing, which is not accessible now through the development banks. I think in the NCQG decision last year, I think paragraph 27 speaks very clearly on how territories need to benefit from climate financing. And MDBs have been given that mandate of becoming bigger, better, and more effective into mobilizing this kind of finance. So I think in the not so this in the not so maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, I think there is avenues available of how we can use MDBs in particular, because these are shareholder owned, right? We can get our parent states to speak and advocate on behalf of these territories, because they are shareholders to the World Bank, to the IMF, to the ADB, to provide some sort of dedicated window or dedicated resources to support the needs and priorities of this territory. So as a regional organization, we are trying to advocate on that front now, together with our partners at the forum, because they hold that mandate on the political priorities in the region. Yeah.
Thank you, Kunal, for that overview. Very helpful. Just before I go to the next question, I could see a lot of people asking in the chat if we will be sharing the recording. So everyone who registered will be sent the recording of this session afterwards. I know we had a lot of people who signed up in Europe and Africa who were not able to join at this time zone. So we do want to make sure that that is available. And this will also be part of an ongoing initiative, part of the subnational island jurisdiction climate coalition that has been mentioned. So also have a look out in your emails for more information about how government representatives can sign up for that, and also non-government organizations such as banks, financial institutions, or NGOs can join as a supporter, because this is a conversation which is only going to continue, and the wide variety of needs that have been made apparent in this and previous events for subnational island jurisdictions is one that this coalition will aim to cater for. So we'll be sending everyone more information about that. And there's also a link in the chat to the Climate Coalition's website. I saw another question that came in. Dr. Gerard Princeton from Massey University asked about EU funds and the role of EU funds. Now, Manon, I know that French Polynesia is an OCT, an overseas country and territory, which impacts its access. And sometimes these funds are not even described as climate financing per se, but they can cater for the kinds of projects. But what is the relationship with French Polynesia and access to funding from the European Union?
So it is true that it's not always labeled as climate finance, but I do consider it as a climate finance. And we have a very strong relationship with the EUD. Um, we One very successful project has been implemented thanks to the EU, has been Protège through SPC. So this project included nature-based solutions, adaptation solutions. Lots of them had to do with agriculture, but with a very strong climate focus. And so this successfully ended a few months ago. I know that this has been considered widely a success by French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna. But we could go on this very strong partnership, and I hope I mentioned well the EU when I mentioned the list of things that have worked so far. So not only the French bilateral climate finance, I'd say through the French Development Agency and ADEB, but also EU funding, which we are eligible to based on the EU association status.
Okay, interesting. I think that will be very important for some of our colleagues joining, especially in the Dutch Caribbean islands, other OCTs, that have often struggled to access funding from the European Union. So it's interesting to see from your perspective, that French Polynesia has been able to access this kind of funding, because I know when we had a similar conversation with colleagues from the Caribbean, many in the OCTs felt like that they were excluded or hadn't had as much challenge opportunity to access that. So I think there's some interesting lessons learned from how French Polynesia has engaged on those fronts. I can see that Kunal has his hand up, so over to you to comment on this.
No, I think, James, very quickly, just to add on to what Manon has said, I think just to highlight that EU is, of course, one of SPC's first observer country, first observer group that has joined in 2021. So I think this gives, this, of course, strengthens the relationship between how SPC works with EU funds. And as Manon has highlighted, I think one of the ways that territories are able to benefit from EU funds has been through a regional organization. And we have multiple projects going on with our 26 member countries and territories using European Union financing. I think if I'm trying to get the figure right, from 2007, I think the European funding to SPC has grown by approximately 244 million euros. So I think that's a considerable amount of resource that the EU has put, and I think we do look forward for more, growing partnerships with the European Union, because that saves. One of the things that we have noticed with the European Union financing is this quite targeted to the needs of the Pacific, and gives countries that are able to give the countries and territories that control on what this could be used to address. So I think that's just wanted to add that point on that as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, that's really important to understand. And Kunal, from what you said there, do I understand that that funding allows for regional projects covering both territories and SIDS countries?
Yes, so I think there's there's different projects happening at this time, and there's a number of projects that have been done in the past, some of which have addressed the needs of Pacific Island countries and territories. There are some that have been focused on, let's say, single country projects, but most of these EU projects through SPC have been looking at a regional mandate, and these are mostly looking at the needs of countries and territories at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. And that brings us to the end of the hour. I really want to say a big thank you to the five speakers who've taken the time to share their expertise. Minister Tatui from Niue, Kunal joining from representing SPC, Xavier Blackman representing the Continental Gateway Group, Lindsay Timarong from the Pacific Island Development Bank, and Manon Macade from the French Polynesia. A very important discussion, one that will continue. As I mentioned before, we will follow up with everyone who registered. We had over 500 people register for this webinar. So this shows that there is a strong interest in this topic, and I know that many were signing up from islands in other parts of the world that would like to watch the recording. But we will be continuing this conversation, and especially as we go towards COP30 in November, our colleagues in the Dutch Caribbean have been working hard on their events to use the COP to really highlight some of the challenges faced by island territories and regions. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we really appreciate the time for everyone in the audience who has participated and shared their interesting questions. Bye-bye.